To be sentenced to death by itself must have been a terrifying experience for anyone unfortunate enough to face capital punishment, but to be thrust into a huge amphitheatre, jeered by a crowd of over 50,000 public spectators, and faced with a brutal death at the jaws of a snarling lion, tiger, or bear, to be torn limb from bloody limb with no hope of mercy, is a nightmare few of us wish to comprehend. So that's exactly what we're going to look at in today's video. This terrifying fate was all too common a punishment for those victims deemed guilty under the laws of the Republic of Ancient Rome, quite literally to be condemned to the beasts. Welcome to the Roman Empire. Damnatio ad bestias, translated from Latin to condemnation to beasts, refers to a form of capital punishment that was a popular public spectacle during the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd centuries AD of the Roman Empire, roughly 27 AD to 300 AD, spanning the reigns of emperors such as Augustus, Caligula, Trajan, Hadrian, and Marcus Aurelius. The punishment was levied for the most severe crimes, often against those deemed enemies of the state, such as slaves, prisoners, and religiously outlawed Christians. The condemned individuals, known as damnati, would face death at the jaws of various ferocious wild animals, unarmed and thrust into the amphitheatre, much to the delight of the thousands of spectators. Sometimes being quite literally thrown to the animals, they were expected to fight the beasts bare hand as macabre entertainment. Even if the damnati managed to somehow kill one of the beasts, perhaps expecting victory, fresh animals would be let loose inside the amphitheatre until all inside had been slain. As recorded by philosopher, playwright, and statesman Lucius Aeneas Seneca at the time, quote, "They have no armour to defend them, and are open everywhere to blows, and no blow occurs without a wound. There is no escape for them." So feared was death by damnatio ad bestias that rather than face the wrath of the wild animals, there are accounts of some condemned choosing to take their own lives instead, even resorting to brutal and nauseating methods. Quote, "One German who was making ready for the morning exhibition withdrew in order to relieve himself, the only thing which he was allowed to do in secret and without the presence of a guard. While so engaged, he seized the stick of wood tipped with a sponge which was devoted to the vilest uses, and stuffed it just as it was down his throat. Thus he blocked up his windpipe and choked." Other accounts record how, on the night before one set of gladiatorial games in 393 AD, 29 Saxon prisoners due to face damnatio ad bestias in the morning strangled each other to death in their cells rather than be publicly mauled. And another recounts the cruel death of one damnati who broke his neck between the spokes of a wooden cart's wheel upon entering the arena. Roman mosaics of the period depict a host of wild animals mauling their victims in a range of bloody and brutal manners, including one particularly terrifying leopard eating the face of a bound man, another lunging to attack a victim tied to a stake, and the grotesque scene of a huge tiger feeding on the body of a clawed and bloody damnati. Unlike the proud, often flattering mosaics and relics that depict gladiators in scenes of triumphant victory or honourable death, those of damnatio ad bestias illustrate the agonizing death of the terrified and helpless victims. Lions, tigers, and bears. The now extinct Barbary lion, leopards, panthers, and hyenas were imported from North Africa, and brown bears, wild boars, and wolves were captured in Gaul, Britain, and Europe, whilst the Roman army was on campaign. Tigers were traded from Western Asia, especially for the spectacle, and were considered premier beasts for use in the arena. Elephants were more exotic and not native to the areas largely controlled by the Roman Empire, so were very rarely used in the practice of damnatio ad bestias. Although there are accounts of their use, and surprisingly even crocodiles, rhinos, cows, and hippos. Aulus Cornelius Gellius, a famed Roman encyclopedist of the 1st century, recorded how, quote, "There were many savage wild beasts, brutes remarkable for their huge size, and all of uncommon appearance or unusual ferocity." Added to this, the fact that the animals would most likely have been starved and abused before their entrance into the arena makes for a nightmarish scenario. Once traded, captured, or imported, the wild beasts then had to be transported to the amphitheatres and arenas ranged across the empire, or to the Colosseum itself in Rome. Trained handlers and hunters were most likely involved in capturing these animals from the wild, and once caught, they would have been restrained and prepared for transportation using crude methods such as chain, ropes, and cages. Animals sourced from far overseas regions of the empire were transported by ship, and this method was employed for animals like lions and leopards, and the more exotic species such as elephants, which, as can be imagined, would have been a perilous task given the size and nature of these wild beasts. Large predators like tigers or bears needed ample space to move around, so confined conditions aboard the ship could lead to stress, injuries, and even fatalities among the animals. Rough seas and storms could be particularly hazardous. A stormy sea could lead to a damaged ship, causing cages or restraints to break or malfunction, and potentially setting the animals loose and causing harm to the crew or themselves. But animals obtained from nearby provinces or regions surrounding Rome might have been transported overland instead. This likely involved the use of carts and cages, and the use of handlers to ensure the animals' survival during the lengthy journey. Ensuring their health and survival during transit was crucial to maintaining their condition for the spectacle. Escape, injury, death, and stress to the animals were all aspects that had to be considered, as well as logistics such as food, water, and perhaps medical attention. In some accounts, instead of attempting to transport adult animals, there were efforts to breed and rear them closer to the arenas or cities where the spectacles were held. This reduced the risk of long-distance transportation and, in theory, ensured a constant supply of animals for events. However, it is unknown how common a practice this really was. However, ultimately, most animals involved in damnatio ad bestias also did not go on to live the rest of their own lives. The logistics behind feeding, maintaining, and housing these wild beasts proved too much, and after the games finished, they were either set loose in the amphitheatre to be hunted for sport, or simply killed. Crime and punishment. Prior to Rome's use of condemnation to the beasts as a form of capital punishment, other civilizations are thought to have utilized this practice. The oldest recorded civilization in the world, the Mesopotamians, are believed to have thrown criminals into pits with dangerous animals as a form of execution. And the ancient Egyptians, recorded in period reliefs and inscriptions, may have used animals, particularly crocodiles, as a method of capital punishment. Rome's first recorded use of this punishment was in 167 BC, when General Lucius Aemilius Pallas subjected deserters from his army to be trampled to death by huge elephants, and from this eventually stemmed the public spectacle of damnatio ad bestias. Victims encompassed a wide range of individuals from different social, legal, and cultural backgrounds within the Roman Empire. These included those convicted of serious crimes such as murder, theft, and treason, slaves who disobeyed their masters, committed crimes or attempted escape, enemies captured in battles or uprisings against the Roman Empire, and individuals who posed a threat to the political or religious order of the empire. This punishment could not be pardoned even for respected citizens or honored veterans of the military, and enemies of the state were subject to execution without trial. As well as providing a popular form of entertainment, the punishment of damnatio ad bestias also provided a distraction from the social upheavals and political issues prevalent during the period. The allure of these spectacular events often drew large crowds, temporarily shifting focus from potential grievances or unrest among the people. Damnatio ad bestias also served as a terrifying example to Rome's enemies of the consequences of resistance, but also to the people, providing a bloody example of what could happen should Rome's citizens decide to dissent. By staging these gory events, the state strategically entertained and incited the crowd with the brutal deaths, whilst highlighting the strength of their power and control over life and death. It was a stark reminder to the people of the potential consequences of disobedience or criminal behavior, and the subjugation and public execution of criminals reminded the population of their place in society. Persecution of Christianity. The origins of Christian persecution can be traced back to the 1st century AD after the death of Jesus Christ, and although not initially widespread, conflicts arose as Christianity grew and began to differentiate itself from Judaism. The rapid spread of Christianity posed a challenge to traditional Roman religious beliefs and practices. Christians often refused to participate in traditional Roman religious practices and refused to acknowledge the Roman gods, which was considered a form of defiance against the state's revered religion. And as Christianity gained traction and followers, it began to challenge the established social order. Further to this, due to their refusal to participate in emperor worship, they were seen as disloyal to the state and the ruling emperor. This refusal to acknowledge the divine authority of the emperor could have been interpreted as a threat to the stability of the empire, especially during periods of political uncertainty. Christians were widely blamed for the Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD, and Emperor Nero initiated a brutal campaign against them, leading to extensive executions and torture. Most notably, the wrapping of victims in bloody animal skins before being fed to savage dogs. In the centuries that followed, some emperors were tolerant of the religion, while others actively pursued policies against Christians. The use of such public capital punishment was a symbolic assertion of Roman power and religious authority. By subjecting Christians to such a gruesome and public death, the authorities aimed to diminish the growing influence of Christianity and maintain the dominance of traditional Roman beliefs. Damnatio ad bestias is a recurrent theme in Christian writings of the period, strongly linked with the idea of martyrdom. The concept of martyrdom within Christianity refers to individuals who willingly endure persecution or death for their religious beliefs, as such ascending to heaven to be with God. Christians who remained steadfast in their beliefs and were subject to condemnation to the beasts were seen as choosing their faith over their lives, and this unwavering commitment in the face of extreme suffering and death inspired others. There are many recorded examples of this punishment in Christian law. Ignatius, the Bishop of Antioch, was sentenced to damnatio ad bestias in Rome around 107 AD under the persecution of Emperor Trajan and was revered in Christian tradition as a true martyr. The slave girl Blandina was cruelly both crucified and subjected to damnatio ad bestias at the same time, and the story of Perpetua and Felicity, a young Christian noblewoman and her servant, relates how they were both sentenced in 203 AD and faced a wild cow and a wild boar in the arena. Thank you so much for watching this episode of the Roman Empire. Please do subscribe if you enjoyed this video, as we're a new channel and hoping to make many more videos like this exploring the Roman Empire. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next week for another video. Cheers!